He asked for the license, looked at the registration, handed nothing back. Then, with a child watching from the back seat, he hit the man behind the wheel, open palm, full across the face. No warning, and no reason that held up to anything. The driver kept his hands up. His 6-year-old daughter screamed, and the officer kept going methodical and unhurried, as if what he was doing had a name and a procedure and a form to fill out afterward. It didn't. That was the whole point. The city moved the way it always did. At that hour, headlights bleeding into wet asphalt, horns flaring somewhere 2 blocks over the smell of exhaust, and rain-soaked concrete drifting through cracked windows. Chicago on a Tuesday evening was not a place that slowed down for anyone, and Daniel Carter had long stopped expecting it to. He drove the same route every night south on Ashland, left on 31st, past the laundromat and the shuttered hardware store, then 3 more blocks to the building with the broken lobby light that the landlord had been meaning to fix for going on 4 months. He was tired in the specific way that 2 jobs and no backup produces the kind of tired that doesn't fully leave even after sleep, that sits behind the eyes and weighs on the shoulders and becomes, after enough years, simply the texture of your life. He was 34 years old and he looked it. But in the rearview mirror, Emily was talking, and that changed something in his face every time. And then Mrs. Patterson said the butterfly was sleeping inside the cocoon. Emily announced from the back seat, her voice carrying the authority of someone delivering important news. But I told Marcus that's not really sleeping. It's more like changing. Like when you change your shirt, but you're still you. She considered this for a moment. Except the butterfly changes way more than a shirt. Daniel glanced at her reflection in the mirror. She was buckled in on the left side, her backpack wedged beside her, a streak of what looked like purple marker on her left hand. He had no idea when that had happened. He said, "That's actually exactly right, Em?" His voice was quieter than hers, worn at the edges, but he meant it. Emily moved on to something about a boy named Marcus, who had sneezed on her drawing, and Daniel let her talk, nodding at the right moments, keeping his eyes on the road. This was the part of the day he protected. The 20 minutes in the car after he picked her up from Ms. Deanna's on Halstead, before the apartment, and the dinner he'd have to figure out from whatever was left in the refrigerator. 20 minutes where she told him everything, and he listened, and neither of them had to be anywhere else. Half a block north on the corner, where the Cook County State's Attorney's satellite office shared a building with a bail bondsman and a tax prep service. A woman in a dark coat came through the glass doors and let them close behind her. Olivia Hayes tugged the collar up against the November air and checked her phone. It was 6:43 in the evening. She had been inside since 7 that morning. Her feet hurt. She had a briefing to prepare for Thursday, and the rideshare app was showing an 8-minute wait, which meant standing on this corner for 8 minutes in the cold. She stepped to the curb and stood there, shoulders slightly forward against the wind, watching the light down the block cycle from green to yellow. She was not thinking about anything remarkable. She was thinking about whether she had enough coffee at home and whether she'd remembered to respond to her mother's text from Sunday. The street was ordinary. The evening was ordinary. She was simply a tired woman in a dark coat, standing at the right place at the wrong time, or the right time depending on how the next few minutes unfolded. 2 blocks east, Officer Ryan Blake sat in his patrol car with the engine running, and the heat turned up, watching a green sedan idle at the intersection ahead. He had pulled that car over 11 minutes ago. The driver, a heavy-set man in a delivery uniform, had been apologetic from the moment he rolled down his window, speaking quickly, nodding repeatedly, already. Sorry before he knew what for. Ryan hadn't written a ticket. There was nothing to write a ticket for. He had asked for license and registration held them longer than necessary, walked a slow circle around the vehicle, and then handed everything back without a word and returned to his car. He sat there now, watching the man pull away carefully, using his turn signal, checking his mirrors twice. Ryan's expression didn't change, but there was something at the corners of his mouth, not quite a smile, but close enough. He had been doing this for 6 years, long enough to know exactly how much space his uniform created and exactly how to use it. He wasn't the kind of officer who lost his temper. He was something more deliberate than that. He simply understood that a badge in the right hands was a very efficient instrument, and he had spent 6 years developing a feel for when and how to apply it. He pulled forward when the light changed. His eyes moved across the intersection in that practiced, slow-sweeping way, logging vehicles, logging faces, a city bus, a woman with a stroller, a gray Honda Civic with a cracked right taillight driven by a man with his eyes on the road, and a child visible in the back seat. Ryan watched it for 3 seconds. Then he hit his lights. Daniel saw the flash of red and blue in his mirror and felt the specific drop in his stomach that most people feel, that automatic recalculation of the last few minutes. Was I speeding? Did I run something? What did I miss? He hadn't been speeding. He hadn't run anything. The light ahead had been green. He checked both side mirrors out of reflex, then signaled and pulled toward the curb, already reaching for the glove compartment, where he kept the registration folded inside the insurance card. In the back seat, Emily went quiet. It happened in an instant, mid-sentence, mid-word almost, and Daniel felt it more than he saw it. The energy in the car changed. He looked in the mirror, and she was watching the police car behind them, her small body gone still in the way children go still, when something doesn't feel right, but they don't have the vocabulary to name it. "It's okay," he said, keeping his voice level. "It's fine. Just sit tight." She didn't answer. She pulled her knees together and looked at the car behind them with wide, careful eyes. Ryan took his time getting out. He adjusted his belt, ran a hand along the top of his patrol car, and walked to the driver's side window at the pace of someone who was not in any hurry and had no reason to be. When Daniel lowered the window, Ryan looked at him for a moment, without saying anything, the kind of look that is designed to make a person uncomfortable, that lands just below the threshold of something you could point to and name. "Evening," Ryan said. The word came out flat, stripped of anything conversational. Daniel kept his hands visible on the steering wheel. "Evening, officer. Can I ask what this is about?" Ryan didn't answer the question. He looked past Daniel into the car, glancing at the back seat where Emily sat, then back at Daniel. "License and registration." Daniel reached slowly for the glove compartment, narrating each movement the way you learn to do when you've been pulled over enough times to understand that visibility matters. He handed both documents through the window. His license was current. His registration was current. His insurance was current. Everything was in order because Daniel Carter did not have the luxury of letting anything fall out of order. Ryan took the documents and held them without looking at them. He studied Daniel's face instead with that same flat, assessing expression. "You know why I stopped you?" "No, sir, I don't," Daniel said. "I wasn't speeding. I didn't run any lights." "Tail light," Ryan said. "Rear right, it's cracked." The tail light was cracked. Daniel knew it was cracked. It had been cracked for 2 weeks, and he had the receipt for the replacement bulb assembly sitting on his kitchen counter, waiting for the Saturday he had time to put it in. A cracked housing over a functioning light was not a moving violation. He knew that. But he said, "I understand, officer. I have the part at home I've been planning to." "Step out of the vehicle," Ryan said. The request landed wrong. It was too fast, too flat, disconnected from anything that had been said before it. Daniel stayed still for a half-second, processing. "I'm sorry." "Out of the vehicle, sir." Ryan's voice had not changed in volume or tone. It was the same register as everything else he had said. And that was somehow the most unsettling part. Daniel looked in the mirror at Emily. She was watching him. He turned back to Ryan and said carefully, "Officer, I have my daughter in the car. If there's an issue with the documentation, I'm happy to address it, but I'd really prefer to." He didn't finish the sentence. Ryan's hand came through the open window fast, Direct the way someone moves when they've done a thing before and have no hesitation about doing it again. And struck Daniel across the left side of his face, open palm, the sound of it sharp and flat in the cold air. Daniel's head snapped to the right. His hands came off the steering wheel by reflex. From the back seat, Emily made a sound that was not a word. It was high and broken, and it came from somewhere deeper than language. Daniel stayed still for a moment. His cheek burned. His eyes had watered involuntarily. He could feel the precise outline of the impact on his face, could feel his jaw tightening against the instinct to respond to it. He was aware of Emily behind him. He was aware that she had just watched that happen. He was aware that the man outside his window was wearing a badge and a sidearm, and had just demonstrated clearly, and without ambiguity, that he did not intend to operate within any rules Daniel had access to. He raised both hands, slowly, open palms, visible, and held them up beside his head. He did not turn to look at Ryan. He looked at the mirror. He looked at Emily. She was crying now, silently, her mouth open, and her eyes fixed on her father's face. He held her gaze and kept his hands exactly where they were, and whatever was moving through him. In that moment, the heat in his face, the pressure behind his ribs, the part of him that wanted to push back against something that had no right to touch him. He locked it down and kept it there, because Emily was watching. And that was the only thing that mattered. Ryan walked back to his patrol car without hurrying. He took Daniel's license and registration with him, held them loosely in one hand, and sat in the driver's seat for a full 2 minutes, doing nothing visible through the windshield. It was a technique Daniel recognized, without being able to name it, the deliberate withholding of information, the manufactured wait that reminded you exactly who held the clock. Daniel kept his hands on the steering wheel and watched the patrol car in his mirror. His left cheek still carried the heat of the strike. He did not touch it. In the back seat, Emily had stopped making sound. She was sitting with her knees pressed together and her backpack clutched against her chest like a barrier, her eyes moving between the police car behind them and the back of her father's head. She was 6 years old, and she understood with the precise animal clarity that children carry before the world teaches them to doubt it that something was wrong. Not traffic stop wrong, not pulled over for a tail light wrong, something that sat lower and felt heavier than that. "Daddy," she said. Her voice had gone small. Daniel didn't turn around. He kept his eyes on the mirror on Ryan's silhouette behind the wheel. "I'm here, Em. Just stay in your seat." Why did he do that? He didn't answer right away. There was no answer he could give her that was true, and also something a 6-year-old should have to carry. He said, "I don't know, baby. Just stay in your seat for me." Ryan came back after those 2 minutes. He didn't return the documents. He stood at the window with them in his hand, held loosely at his side, and looked at Daniel with that same flat expression, the one that had no anger in it and no heat, just the absolute confidence of someone who had never once been held accountable for the way they looked at people. "There's an issue with the registration," Ryan said. Daniel kept his voice even. "My registration is current, officer. It's renewed through March." "I'm seeing something different." Ryan's tone didn't shift. It was declarative, not argumentative, as though the matter were already decided. "Going to need you to come back to the vehicle with me while I verify." "I'm happy to wait here while you verify." Daniel's hands were still on the steering wheel. "My daughter is in the car. I'd prefer to stay with her." Ryan looked through the window at Emily. It was a brief look, clinical, the way you check a detail you already knew was there. He looked back at Daniel. "There's also the matter of the fine," Daniel said. "What fine?" "Defective equipment. The tail light." Ryan named a figure, $220, with the same flat delivery as everything else. There was no citation in his hand, no ticket book, no device, nothing that suggested this was a documented process happening within any system that kept records. The number landed the way it was meant to. $220 was not an amount Daniel could produce from his wallet on a Tuesday evening on the side of 31st Street. It was close to a full day's pay from the second job, the warehouse shift he picked up 3 nights a week to cover the gap between what the first job paid and what Emily's life actually cost. Ryan knew that in the way people like him always seemed to know it, in the way the 2-minute wait and the undocumented fine and the whole architecture of the stop was built on a particular kind of knowledge about who would fight back and who would not. "I don't have that on me," Daniel said. "Then we have a problem," Ryan said. It was around this point that a few people on the sidewalk began to slow down. A man in a work jacket stopped near the corner, hands in his pockets, watching from a distance of about 15 feet. A woman pushing a cart loaded with grocery bags came around the front of a parked car, saw what was happening, and stopped where she was. 2 teenagers on the far side of the street stood still for a moment, looking over. The street had not gone quiet. There was still traffic, still the ambient sound of the city, but there was a pocket of attention forming around the gray Honda, and the patrol car, a loose radius of people who had registered that something was happening and had made the calculation, each of them separately, about what to do with that information. The man in the work jacket pulled out his phone. He held it at his side, looked around once at Ryan, at the patrol car, at the woman with the cart, and then put it back in his pocket. The woman with the cart took a half step toward the building line and looked at the sidewalk. The teenagers exchanged a glance and kept moving, not quickly. The way you move when you want to be somewhere else, but you're trying to look like that, was already where you were going. Daniel saw all of it in his peripheral vision. He felt the particular weight of being witnessed by people who had decided before anything happened that they couldn't afford to be involved. Emily was crying now, not loudly, but steadily, the way a child cries when they've already been crying for a while. And the tears have become simply the state of things. Daniel could see her in the mirror, her face wet, her lower lip pressed hard to stop more sounds from coming out, the way he'd seen her practice, not crying when she scraped her knee, because she'd decided at some point that she was too old to cry about that. She was 6 years old, and she was trying not to cry in front of a police officer, and that fact moved through Daniel like something structural giving way. He kept his face still. He held the mirror with his eyes. From the sidewalk in front of the state's attorney's building, Olivia Hayes had not moved from the spot where she'd been standing when the patrol car's lights first came on. She had watched Ryan get out of his car. She had watched the approach, the body language, the practiced slowness of a man performing authority rather than exercising it. She had seen the strike, seen it clean from a direct angle less than 30 feet away, the sound of it reaching her half a second after the motion. She had watched Daniel's head snap to the right and watched him raise his hands. Her rideshare app still showed 4 minutes. She had closed it without requesting the ride. She was now standing with her phone held at her side, at a downward angle, the camera running. She had started recording within the first minute of the stop, once the pattern of it became clear to her. Not because she needed that time to decide it was wrong. She had known that immediately. She needed it because she was thinking the way she always thought when something crossed her desk that looked like one incident, but felt like a system. She was thinking about what a recording would need to show to be useful in a proceeding. She was thinking about angle and audio and timestamp. She was thinking about the documents Ryan had taken and not returned, the undocumented fine, the way he'd looked at Emily like she was an afterthought he'd already accounted for. She was thinking, this man has done this before. Not this specific thing maybe, but some version of it in some variation of this dynamic. A stop with no documentation, a demand with no legal basis. A person who had every reason in the world not to fight back. She had read enough case files and sat across enough tables from enough complainants to recognize the ease of it. The ease was the tell. Ryan was not nervous. He was not escalating out of some loss of control. He was operating within what he understood to be the reliable range of his own impunity. That ease did not come from one afternoon. It came from a pattern that had held long enough for him to stop thinking about whether it would. Olivia did not step forward. Not yet. The phone kept running. She shifted her angle slightly to keep Ryan's face in frame. Ryan put one hand on the roof of Daniel's car and leaned down to the window. His voice, when he spoke again, had not changed in register, but had acquired something new, a particular quality of finality, like a door being closed from the outside. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle." This time, there was no version of refusal available. The slap had already happened. The cash demand had already happened. The 2-minute wait with the documents had already happened. Ryan was not asking any more. He was closing the last gap between request and consequence, and both of them knew it. Daniel said, "Officer, my daughter is in this car." "Last time." Ryan straightened up and put his hand on the door handle. "Step out, or I add obstruction to the stop." The word obstruction did specific work in that moment. It was the word that converted a person with no charges against them into a person who could be charged. It required nothing. No evidence, no prior action, no witness to anything except the officer's account. It was available to be applied at will, and both men understood that. Daniel understood it, the way you understand the rules of a game you didn't agree to play, but are already inside. He opened the door. He got out slowly, keeping his movements visible and deliberate, both hands away from his body. The cold air hit him after the warmth of the car. He could hear Emily behind him, a soft, continuous sound. Not words, just presence. And he did not look back at her, because he knew that if he looked back at her, the thing he was holding in his chest would become something he could no longer manage. Ryan moved fast once Daniel was outside. Faster than he had moved the entire stop, the first evidence of actual urgency, though it had nothing to do with urgency and everything to do with mechanics. He took Daniel's right arm and turned him toward the car, pressing his chest against the door, and Daniel heard the sound of the handcuffs before he felt them a metallic click against his left wrist. Then the right, the ratchet sound of the cuffs tightening. Behind him, the rear passenger door opened. Emily had undone her buckle and pushed the door open from the inside. Daniel heard the latch, and the hinge heard her feet hit the pavement. She was standing on the sidewalk now, 3 feet from the rear door of the Honda, her backpack still on her face, wrecked and wet, looking at her father with her hands balled into fists at her sides. Ryan positioned himself between Daniel and Emily without making it look deliberate. It looked like logistics. It looked like the natural geometry of a stop officer here, subject there, vehicle there. But the effect was that Daniel, his arms locked behind him, could not get to his daughter, and his daughter could not get to him. "You're going to want to cooperate," Ryan said, close enough that only Daniel could hear it. "Make this easy. Otherwise, we're looking at resisting. We're looking at a long night, and that little girl needs someone to call for her." Daniel turned his head enough to see Emily over Ryan's shoulder. She was standing exactly where she had stopped, not moving toward him, not moving away. Her whole body locked in that particular stillness of a child, waiting for an adult to fix something that the adults have not fixed. Her mouth was open, and she was not making a sound anymore, because she had gone past the point where sounds helped. Daniel said, "Emily, hey, look at me." His voice came out rougher than he intended. "I need you to stand right there. Don't move from that spot. I'm going to be okay." She looked at him. Her chin was shaking. "I'm going to be okay," he said again. He held her eyes. Ryan took Daniel by the arm and moved him toward the patrol car. Daniel went because there was no version of not going that ended with Emily safer. There was no version of resistance, verbal, physical, any kind that the next 30 seconds would reward. He had run the calculation already back when the handcuffs went on, and the calculation only produced one answer: keep her calm, keep her visible, don't give Ryan anything else to use. The patrol car door opened. Ryan put a hand on Daniel's head in that practiced way, the same way he had walked the circle around the delivery driver's car, the same way he had let the 2-minute wait stretch out, the same way he had looked at Emily, like she was a detail he'd already logged. All of it practiced. All of it deliberate. All of it the behavior of a man who had done this enough times to make it automatic. Daniel got in. The door closed. The sound of it was not loud. It was an ordinary mechanical sound. A car door closing the latch, catching the window between inside and outside becoming solid. But it landed in Daniel's chest like something final. He was behind glass now. He could see the street through the windshield, could see the sidewalk, could see the small figures of the people who had been watching from a safe distance, several of whom were now looking at their phones or looking away. He could see Emily still standing by the rear door of the Honda, her backpack on her face turned toward the patrol car. She called out. He couldn't hear the words through the glass, but he could read her mouth, could recognize the shape of the syllable, the way her voice went up at the end, the way it always did when she was asking a question she needed answered. She was saying, "Daddy." She was saying it to a closed window. Daniel pressed his back against the seat. His hands were behind him. He could not reach forward, could not open the door, could not cross the 20 feet of sidewalk that separated him from his daughter. He had made every correct choice available to him. He had kept his hands visible, had not raised his voice, had not given Ryan a single thing to justify any of this. And he was still here in the back of this car, watching his 6-year-old stand alone on a sidewalk in November, while strangers walked past her without stopping. Outside, Ryan was speaking into his radio. His back was to Emily. She was not his concern. She had never been his concern. She was simply a variable in a stop that had gone exactly the way he had planned it to go, and variables like her were not something he was responsible for managing. Emily stood where her father had told her to stand. She did not move from that spot. She waited because he had told her to wait, and she believed with everything in her that waiting was the right thing to do. She kept her eyes on the patrol car. She kept her fists at her sides. She called out one more time, and the wind took it, and the city took it, and the patrol car did not move, and no one on that sidewalk stopped to put a hand on her shoulder or tell her it would be all right. This was the bottom of it. A man with his hands locked behind his back, looking through glass at his daughter. A child standing alone with a backpack on, waiting for something to change. A street full of people who had all decided separately and collectively that this was not their moment to act. 30 feet away on the sidewalk in front of the state's attorney's building, Olivia Hayes had been recording for just over 4 minutes. Her phone was steady, her face was still, and she had just made the decision she'd been holding in suspension since the handcuffs went on. Olivia walked toward the patrol car, the way she moved through a courtroom when she had already won, not fast, not slow, but with the particular quality of forward motion that comes from having nothing left to calculate. She had been standing on that sidewalk for 4 minutes and 53 seconds. She had the strike on video. She had the undocumented demand for $220 on video. She had Ryan's hand on Daniel's arm, the handcuffs, the door closing, Emily standing alone, all of it continuous time-stamped, shot from an angle that captured Ryan's face and both of his hands throughout. She crossed the distance between herself and the patrol car, with her phone in one hand and her credentials case in the other. Ryan was standing near the hood of his patrol car, still on his radio, his back partially turned. He heard her footsteps and turned with the expression of a man who expected to find a civilian to redirect. What he found instead was a woman holding out a badge wallet at chest height, open the official identification of the Cook County State's Attorney's Office facing him in the yellow light of the street. Officer Blake. Olivia's voice carried the same quality as her walk, level forward, nothing in it, that invited negotiation. Olivia Hayes, Assistant District Attorney, Cook County. I need you to step away from that vehicle, and I need you to do it right now. Ryan looked at the badge. He looked at her face. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite recognition, but recalibration, the rapid internal adjustment of a man reassessing terrain. He said, "Ma'am, I'm in the middle of a stop." You are not in the middle of a stop. Olivia kept the badge up. You struck a civilian without provocation. You issued an undocumented demand for cash, and you placed a man in handcuffs in front of his minor child without documented legal basis. I witnessed all of it from the point of initial contact. She held the phone up. And I have all of it here. Ryan's eyes went to the phone. He looked at it for 2 full seconds. He looked back at her. I'm going to need you to step away from that vehicle, Olivia said again. And I'm going to need the keys to those cuffs. Ryan opened his mouth. What came out was the beginning of a sentence, something with the word misunderstanding in it, something with procedure. But Olivia had already turned slightly and was making a call. The person she reached answered in 2 rings, and she spoke clearly with the address with Ryan's badge number, which she had read from his uniform when she was still 30 feet away on the sidewalk, and with a brief specific description of what had occurred. She used the words unprovoked, physical assault, and extortion attempt, and minor child present. She used them without inflection, the way you use words when they are simply the accurate ones. She said she had continuous video from first contact. She asked for an internal affairs supervisor and a senior patrol officer to the location immediately. She ended the call and looked at Ryan. Whatever structure had held his confidence together during the stop, the practiced ease, the flat expression, the architecture of a man who had never once stood on the wrong end of a consequence, had developed a visible crack. He was still standing in the same posture, still in the same spot, but something in the set of his jaw had changed. He was running calculations now. You could see it. The recording, he said. His voice had lost its earlier flatness. There was something behind it now, a register of a man reaching for options. You can't just, I can, Olivia said, and I did. The question you should be thinking about right now is not what I can or can't do. It's what that recording shows and whether you want to add anything else to it. She held the phone, steady camera still running. I'd recommend you get the keys. Ryan unlocked the patrol car. He opened the rear door. Daniel stepped out into the cold air, his arms coming around in front of him, as Ryan produced the key and worked the cuffs off his wrists. The cuffs came free. Daniel brought his hands forward and stood there for a moment, looking at the sidewalk, pressing the circulation back into his left wrist with his right thumb. He looked up and saw Emily. She was still standing where he had told her to stand, exactly where he had left her. Her backpack on her face wrecked her eyes locked on him. She had stayed in that spot for every second of what had happened, had not moved, had not run, had held to the one instruction he had been able to give her before the door closed. When she saw him step free of the car, something in her face broke entirely. She ran. She covered the distance between them in a few steps and hit him at the knees, and Daniel went down, not because she knocked him over, but because he dropped to meet her both knees on the cold concrete, his arms going around her before she had fully stopped moving. She grabbed the front of his jacket with both hands and pressed her face into his shoulder and made the sound she had been holding in a long, ragged exhale that was not quite a word and not quite a cry, but was all of it at once. Daniel held her. He did not say everything was fine because she was 6 years old and smart enough to know that wasn't true. He did not say it was over because he didn't yet know what over looked like. He said nothing. He pressed one hand against the back of her head and held her and let her breathe, and after a while her grip on his jacket loosened slightly, and her breathing slowed, and she was still crying, but more quietly, the way you cry when the worst of the fear has begun to pass. A patrol supervisor arrived within 11 minutes. An internal affairs sergeant arrived 40 minutes after that. Olivia gave her recorded footage and her witness statement on the sidewalk that night, standing under the streetlight, with her coat buttoned against the wind, speaking in the same clear and specific language she had used on the phone. The recording ran 4 minutes and 58 seconds and captured the strike, the undocumented cash demand, the handcuffing, and Ryan's face throughout each event, with sufficient clarity for identification and sequence. Ryan's body cam footage was pulled the same night. The body cam had been running. It showed everything the recording showed from a second angle with audio. When the internal affairs sergeant reviewed both recordings side by side, she noted something in Ryan's behavior that went beyond a single bad stop. The same fluency, the same practiced rhythm, the same absence of hesitation that Olivia had identified from the sidewalk. She pulled Ryan's complaint history before she left the scene. There were 9 prior complaints across 6 years. 2 had been investigated and closed without action. 7 had never advanced past intake. The pattern was not hidden. It had simply never been assembled. Ryan Blake was suspended without pay before the end of that night. The formal charges assault under color of authority official misconduct and attempted extortion were filed within the week. He did not return to duty. Daniel stayed at the scene for a little over an hour, giving his statement to the patrol supervisor, while Emily sat in the front passenger seat of the Honda, with the door open and her feet hanging out wrapped in a blanket that one of the responding officers had produced from somewhere without being asked. She was calmer by then. She had stopped crying. She was holding a granola bar that the same officer had given her, eating it with the methodical focus of a child who had decided to concentrate on something concrete and manageable. At one point, she looked up and found her father's eyes across the few feet between them. He was talking to the supervisor, but he was watching her. He gave her a small nod. She gave him one back, precise and serious, and returned to the granola bar. When it was done, the statement given the contact information exchanged the case number written on a card and handed to Daniel. He walked to the car and stood beside Emily and looked at her for a moment. She looked back at him. "Can we go home now?" she asked. "Yeah," he said. "We can go home." Olivia was gone before Daniel finished his statement. She had given everything she had, the footage, the account, the badge number she had memorized at 30 feet, the timeline reconstructed from her own timestamps, and then she had zipped her coat and walked back up the block in the direction she had originally been heading. She did not leave her phone number for Daniel. She did not wait to be thanked. The case would move through a system she was part of, and she would be involved in its progress through proper channels, and that was sufficient. She had been standing at the right place at the right time, and she had done what the moment required. That was the whole of it. She was 2 blocks away when she finally opened her rideshare app again. The wait was 3 minutes. She stood at the corner with her hands in her pockets and watched the car icon move toward her on the map. Daniel buckled Emily into the back seat. He checked the strap across her chest, tugged it once to confirm the fit, and she let him do it without comment. None of the usual, "Daddy, I can do it myself," that she deployed on ordinary evenings. He closed the rear door, got in behind the wheel, and sat for a moment with his hands on the steering wheel before starting the engine. The drive home was the same route it always was. South on Ashland, left on 31st, past the laundromat and the shuttered hardware store. The streets looked the same as they had an hour and a half ago. The city had not changed. The broken lobby light in his building's entrance was still broken when he pulled into the lot exactly as it had been every night for 4 months. But Emily was quiet in the back seat, in a different way than she had been quiet before. Not the stillness of fear, but the stillness of a child who has been through something and is still in the process of understanding what it was. Daniel watched her in the rearview mirror the same way he had watched her at the beginning of the drive in the Easy, before everything, minutes when she had been telling him about the butterfly. She wasn't talking now, but her eyes were open, and she was looking out the window at the city moving past, and the grip on her backpack had loosened. Justice doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it's a woman in a dark coat who happens to be standing in the right place, who keeps her phone steady while everyone else looks away, who knows that what she is watching is not one bad night, but a long history of bad nights finally running out of room to hide. It arrives in the cold on a sidewalk without ceremony, and then it walks away without waiting to be thanked.